Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was January 21st, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt cara companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Johan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. If you're looking at the image of today's document on the website, then you might notice that we have seen this document before. And that's because way back in episode 5, I went to this page in the Treasury records and noticed that there was a record on the top half for a baker, someone who was a baker in the household of Violant during her time as the Duchess of Girona in the second half of 1386. And the payment, though, was made in 1387, but within the date of the terms for which that baker was being paid for, the period of time, it had ended on December 31st. And so I linked it in to the day of December 31st in that episode. And now we've arrived to the date that the record was actually written down on January 21st. And I'll tell you, January 21st was a big day for Treasury records, because if you go to this register on Pares, you will see that there are actually pages and pages of records dated on January 21st. I don't know what to make of that. Was it that there was a backlog and they just kind of got around to entering all these things on January 21st? Was January 21st actually a day that was designated for recording a bunch of Treasury records, payment records? And will we see this again in a lot of the other Treasury record books, that there's a particular day when it's just, I guess, maybe that day in the cycle when they enter in a lot of records? I will be watching to see if I can understand why January 21st is overrepresented in the payment records for this period of time. What I can also say is that they had to get up and running with the record-keeping services of a whole new reign. Keep in mind that Pere the Ceremonious had ruled for over 50 years, and all of the record-keeping and operations and bureaucracy had been, done according to traditions and plans, and moving from one year to the next, they knew how to do it, and they didn't really have to do as much starting over from scratch. And so when Johan begins his reign, they're going to have to figure out, well, how are we going to handle payment systems when a lot of the people who are getting paid would have been paid out of a different fund or a different process, being a member of the staff of the Duke of Girona, and now that same person is getting paid out of a different fund, probably, now that Johan and Violant are king and queen. And then how are they going to make records for all of that? It's quite possible that it took them a while to figure out, okay, how are we going to arrange the records? So today's document is the one that's on the second half of that same page. And this document was listed in the collection by Tranks y Odenia and Baihes y Hardy that I referred to in episode 22 on January 15th. So it's minstrels, and the document collection has a full transcription of this payment record. Nothing in it is immediately eye-catching, with one exception. This is a husband and wife team. The first line has the name of the Treasury official Johan CallosRecipients, and then in the second half it lists who's going to be getting the payment. So starting from a little bit after the first half of the line, en Jacques de Portalbert et Anna Isabel Muller Seva. Muller Seva are the first two words on the second line, his wife. This is a husband and wife troubadour team. It is very unusual to come across a woman troubadour at this time, so they are naturally really interesting. And it turns out that these two are pretty awesome, because there's quite a lot of documentation of their services to the royal family of the Crown of Aragon over the years, and also to others in the region. So in 1385, Pere the Ceremonious recommended the Portalberts to the King of Navarre, and then many years later, in 1388, Violant recommended them again, but of course to the next king and queen of Navarre. But Violant recommended the Portalberts to somebody else as well. Someone who hasn't yet come up on the podcast, but was hugely influential from a cultural standpoint for Johan and Violant. That person is Gaston Fébue, the Count of Foix-Béarn. Gaston Fébue has become very well known to scholars of the Middle Ages who are interested in hunting, because Gaston Fébue wrote one of the most copied and most prominent treatises on hunting of the Middle Ages. And Gaston Fébue was quite the guy. He was like the sort of masculine political elite that I think Johan aspired to in a lot of ways. He was not like Pere the Ceremonious in that Gaston Fébue didn't have quite the kind of cruelty and warmongering level that Pere the Ceremonious did, but they had something in common, Pere and Gaston Fébue. They were really like womanizers. So Gaston Fébue did not have anything like a relationship of respect and equity with his wives that we see taking place between Johan and Violant. I think Johan aspired to write some kind of manuscript on poetry, music, and hunting, and just culture in general, and I think if he had lived longer he would have done that, because Gaston Fébue's book, which was titled Le Livre de la Chasse, the Book of the Hunt, the Book of the Chase, it was one that Johan read, and I'm pretty sure he enjoyed it immensely. And it was very much like a kind of self-fashioning project from Gaston Phébus. Gaston Phébus was very famous for basically building himself up as a big man of the elite class. He was very successful in battle and also got a lot of plunder, and so he was very, very wealthy. His territory was kind of like a mountainous territory in the region of the Pyrenees, and also he had this amazing blonde hair, so that when people looked at him, it was like looking at like this yellow sun shape because of how golden his hair was. And so that's actually how he got that name, Phébus, which is from Phoebus, the name for Apollo in Greek myth. You know, the shining of the sun, basically, is what's attributed to the glow around Apollo. All right, so I got a little sidetracked talking about Gaston Phébus, but all of this is to say that when Violant was writing about the Portalberts, she recommended them to one of the brightest cultural luminaries in the entire region, Gaston Phébus, as well as to her buddy, the King of Navarre. So the Portalberts, they're really good. They have a track record performing for the royal family of the Crown of Aragon, according to the documentation we have from 1385 until 1393. And there might be more than that we just haven't found yet in the documents. So they are one of the favorite troubadour performers for Johan and Violant. And so here we are looking at their payment record, which is one that covers about a 3-month period of time, and they get 267 solides, which is about this. It's like comparable, like, well, actually it's 100 solides less than what the baker got. But the record here is interesting because there's this other amount that's listed as like the per day. So maybe they're not actually there every single day during that 3 months, and so it actually comes out to being a higher rate than the baker on the same page, but not quite sure about that. What is clear in this record, though, is that they were minstrels that performed for Johan and Violant when they were living in Girona in the latter part of 1386, and then they continued on with them and moved to Barcelona. So it's interesting to see that the minstrel team, the husband and wife minstrel team, were one of the staff members, the household members that we know accompanied Johan and Violant from Girona to Barcelona. So you might be wondering, as I'm wondering, what were their performances like? Were they doing any of the Ars Nova or Ars Subtilior? I don't know. And one of the things that I'm hoping to find out over the course of this year that I'm working with these documents is a little bit more about what troubadour performances were like. So I'm going to be doing a little bit more reading in the secondary literature about that, and then we'll see if anything comes up as I look at other records that are in the collection from Trencs i Ordenya and Bages i Jardí, and see if I can get a little bit more information about exactly what they did when they performed. All right, thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I have done my job. Because remember, the motto of the historian's notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. You always want to know more at the end than you had thought of at the beginning, hopefully. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Johan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. In the meantime, take care.